It's time for crime. It's time for crime fiction. Hello, scholars. This is Kevin Jones, and we're going to talk a little bit more about certain important topics in crime fiction. As this is an English class, there are certain concepts we have to deal with. Don't panic. There are only three that I'll talk about this time. The first is probably the most important, and that is the concept of character. Now, in crime fiction, we want our characters to be interesting, to be unusual, to be engaging, to be the sort of person that you want to spend 200 to 600 pages with. So, you don't want perfect characters. Perfect characters aren't very interesting. You want characters that are flawed, that are a little unusual, that are a little conflicted, that perhaps resemble you and me. Now, you may think that I'm simply a finger puppet, but no. I'm Sherlock Holmes, the world's foremost crime fighter, and I'm perhaps the iconic major character in crime fiction. Why? Well, because I'm interesting. I've got a cool hat. Notice the hat? Pretty cool, huh? Cape? Meerschaum pipe? No, ignore the fingers, ignore the fingers. Ignore the man behind the screen. I'm interesting because not only am I a great detective, I'm one of the first in the English language, but I'm also interesting because I have flaws. I'm very intelligent, but I get bored very easily. Don't we all? And because I get bored very easily, I tend to fall into bad habits. What are my bad habits? Well, I play the violin. I think I play the violin very, very well, but my landlady, Mrs. Hudson, my friend and roommate, Dr. Watson, my brother Mycroft, all think I play the violin abysmally badly. They're fools. Also, when I get bored, I tend to smoke a lot, as you can see, Meerschaum pipe, ever present, and I also shoot cocaine intravenously in a 7% solution. I am not a role model, and you should probably not take me home as a babysitter. But I only do it because I'm bored. I have to have things that interest me in order to get my brain working. Things that interest me are insoluble crimes, things that the professional crime fighters have not been able to deal with. I'm good at that. I'm so good at that I had such a fandom, so many people liked my stories, that when Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, my creator, wanted to move on to other things, spiritualism, table tapping, that sort of thing, photographing fairies in the garden, there are some interesting photographs that he took, but it turns out they've been photoshopped. Anyway, when he tried to kill me off in a wrestling match with Professor Moriarty, the Napoleon of crime, at Reichenbach Falls, it appeared that we both went over the falls. You don't want to go over the falls in detective fiction. It hurts. But anyway, he thought he killed me off. The outcry in England was tremendous. And part of those crying out against the death of Sherlock Holmes was Queen Victoria. She and others demanded that Sherlock be returned to the page, or the stage, or the finger, as the case may be. And so 4 years later, Sherlock Holmes was brought back for one more time, his last bow. Just shows you how interesting, how powerful, good, well-developed characters can be. Now, there are three major kinds of characters in detective fiction. One, the amateur detective, such as myself. Not all of them have cool hats. Notice the hat. Notice the cape. Great cape, huh? Ignore the fingers. Ignore the man behind the screen. But the amateur detective usually has certain quirks. Not that I have any, but the amateur detective may be a little more eccentric than most, maybe a little quaint, maybe a little weird, if you will. Two of the more famous amateur detectives, besides myself, are Hercule Poirot and Miss Marple, two of Agatha Christie's creations. Poirot is kind of a disgusting little dandy with a waxy mustache and annoying manners, just not the sort of person you want to hang out with at lunch. Miss Marple, on the other hand, would probably prepare you a nice lunch. She's sort of like everyone's favorite aunt: sensible shoes, cardigan, matching sweater, what else? Purse, always a purse, and yeah, like your aunt. But Miss Marple would probably get the size of the pink bunny suit right for you for Christmas. Another major form of detective in crime fiction is the independent private detective. Usually these are male, though not always. Sue Grafton and Janet Ivanovich in American literature have created two very memorable detectives. Grafton, Kinsey Milhone, and Janet Ivanovich, Stephanie Plum, both very interesting figures, and their books number in each of them has a series, and there are about 20 volumes in each series, and more on the way. Other detectives are, again, often male, hard-boiled. They're tough, they're mean, usually with a trench coat, even if it's not raining, usually with a fedora, even though it's 100 degrees out. Two of the iconic male hard-boiled noir detectives are Dashiell Hammett's Sam Spade. The book to remember there is The Maltese Falcon. It sort of created the hard-boiled genre in detective fiction. The other one, Raymond Chandler's Philip Marlowe, out of Los Angeles, 1930s. If you've seen Chinatown, it's a blatant steal from Raymond Chandler. Yes, it is. And Chandler, you'll be reading a little bit later in the term in The Simple Art of Murder, an essay in which he tries to explain what the mystery is all about. Well, you want to know what the mystery is. At any rate, Philip Marlowe and Dashiell Hammett's Sam Spade are two very fascinating, hard-boiled, independent, private detectives. They sort of define that subgenre. The other detective type that you're going to deal with this term is the police detective. After all, 3 out of the 4 assigned books are police procedurals. And they're police detectives, but they're conflicted. They have a difficult home life. They're usually in midlife. They're not terribly social. They have problems. Usually alcohol, usually dietary, probably mental and emotional, but that could be another matter. We won't deal with that here. That's for a psych class. But they usually get the crime solved, usually in about 200 to 300 pages. For those of you who are worried about the books and the lengths of the books, they move quickly, most of them 200, 300 pages. I know. The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo weighs about 1.5 tons. It's about 600, 700 pages, depending on your edition, but it's actually very, very quick moving. Also, I lied just a little bit. It's not, strictly speaking, a police procedural. The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo doesn't have a lot of police in it. The procedures are sort of freelance journalism and freelance computer hacking, but I won't go any further into that. You'll have to enjoy that for yourself. So, to recap, notice the cool cap. Recap, 3 major kinds of detectives in crime fiction. The independent detective, usually brilliant, but with foibles, and a pipe, and maybe a cool hat. Notice the hat, cool, huh? Ignore the fingers, ignore the man behind the screen. The hard-boiled detective, a major figure, particularly in American literature. Think fedora, think trench coat, even if it's not raining. Think Raymond Chandler, think Dashiell Hammett, think Chinatown. Forget it, Jake, it's Chinatown. And the third, the police procedural, the beleaguered police detective. All right, I think that's enough for today. We'll be back another time with 2 more concepts to keep in mind for crime fiction. Thank you. bored, bored, bored.